2024 is coming to an end, and this means it's time to look back at some of the highlights from the past year. For me, it was a very special year because it was the first year where I was a full-time wildlife photographer and filmmaker. So I had a lot of time to do wildlife photography compared to the recent years before. The very first highlight of 2024 was just a few days in January. There was a huge flock of bramblings visiting Switzerland. And so I think there were a few hundred thousands of bramblings coming to the same sleeping place for a few weeks. The first successful photography trip was still in January. Together with a good friend, I went to search the Alpine ibex in the mountains, and we had a lot of snow, very cold and icy conditions, what was very nice. So we got some good images. I got some high-key images just from the Alpine ibex in the snow, but also some very nice surroundings with this ice. Yeah, so I think this is one of my favorite images from January. I guess that was still in January when two friends from Poland came to Switzerland and visited me. Or basically they didn't visit me, but there was a very nice exhibition in Western Switzerland. And one of these two guys, I am sure you know him, it's Mateusz Piesiak. He is a very talented wildlife photographer, and he was also part of the exhibition. So the three of us, we just took some extra days in this area and went for some wildlife photography. And it was a very successful time. We had some really nice observations. We did some photography just close by at the lake, where we photographed some mute swans and some ducks. But also we went a little bit into the mountains to photograph the Alpine ibex again. This time not in snow, more in a different area where there was a lot of forest and also some very nice sunsets. So we got some good Alpine ibex silhouette shots during this few days. And also during these days I had the very nice chance to photograph a male capercaillie at sunrise in the first light of the day. And yeah, that was an absolutely beautiful moment to get it as a silhouette, a very mystical image. So I really like how these turned out. And yeah, it was overall just a very fun time together with Mateusz. It was the first time that we did photography together, and he also brought his friend Camille. So the three of us, we had a very fun time. And then after this trip, I guess it was already February, I started to focus more and more on filmmaking. So as you maybe know, we are currently working on a film project, and this just means that I can't do photography all the time. I just also focus on filmmaking, and I really like it. So you will also see a lot of video footage in these highlights. Here is just some very moody, nice landscape footage in this very nice snowy forest. And yeah, then when it got to March, I got a very spontaneous message by Fabio, who is a good friend and very talented landscape photographer. And Fabio asked me to go to Norway together, and he had actually organized already most of the trip because he had planned to go anyway. And so I said yes because I didn't want to miss the chance to photograph the musk oxen in snow in Norway. So together with Fabio and Andre, another friend, and yeah, we had a very successful week, and yes, some very nice encounters with the musk oxen, but also with some moose and a lot of nice birds around. So I'm not going to show a lot of images from this trip because finally, this video is coming up in December in maybe 1 or 2 weeks. So yeah, you will see all the best footage from this very nice week in very short time here on this channel. After this week in Norway, it was still March and we had a lot of snow in the Alps, and slowly the lekking season of the black grouse started. So in March I spent a few days in the mountains trying to film the black grouse lek for our film project, and I experienced some very nice moments with black grouse during these days. And then a little bit later in April, just close to my home, I continued on a photo project which I already started a few years ago, because there is a dipper breeding very close to my home under a beautiful waterfall. You can also find a short YouTube vlog from this photo project with the dipper on my channel. It was just very nice to spend a lot of days watching the dippers flying to their nest, which was under this waterfall. And yeah, many thousands of images later, I also got some good images. For example, this one, which is one of my favorite images from this dipper project, with the dipper flying into the waterfall, and some of the last light of the day is just touching the dipper. So that was a very nice moment. After this photo project next to my home, it was again time to go into the mountains. And so in May, I spent a few weeks in a remote small mountain cabin trying to film the alpine wildlife. And it was just very nice to spend such a long time in the mountains just by myself. And I had some nice observations of ptarmigans and also of the rock partridge, which is quite hard to find. And yeah, so also the next trip was focused on the rock partridge, which is a very elusive bird species. And together with a good friend who knows more or less a good location, we went into a new area. And yeah, it was a very steep area, but luckily we found on the second day we found a few rock partridges. And I guess I got my best footage of this beautiful, beautiful bird. Even though it's not absolutely fantastic footage, it's, yeah, I'm very happy with what I got there. And then after this, a little bit later, it was time to go to Vienna just for a few days. So this was actually already in June. And this wasn't for photography, but for our film project. That's why I'm mentioning it, because yeah, it was with some very fantastic scientists working in Vienna on grouse, especially on the capercaillie and also on the ptarmigan. It was just very interesting to talk to these scientists and do these interviews for the film project. Then straight after this, it was time to go to the North Sea, to the small island Heligoland. So you probably have already seen the video from this trip on my channel. If you want to see more images from these days on Heligoland, I would recommend to watch the video, because here I'm just going to mention a few highlights. So I guess the biggest highlight was that I was there together with the team from Zeitweise, and also with Luca, a good friend from Berlin. And we just did a lot of good memories during these days. We did some very creative bird photography with some of the gannets which breed on Helgoland, but also with some other bird species. After Helgoland, it was again time to go into the mountains. And yeah, I had a very nice trip together with Mark Siegle, who's a good friend. And we did some photography in a new area in the mountains. And once again, we photographed some alpine ibex, but also did we find some alpine newts in a beautiful mountain lake, and we tried some underwater photography. Didn't work out very well, but at least it was a nice experience. And then after this, probably one of the highlights from this year, we found a rock ptarmigan with 3 young ones. And the young ones were just a few days old. And that was absolutely beautiful to observe this family and get some very nice footage, which was very nice to get, especially for the film project. And then during this same time, I also did a small series with the Alpine ibex once again, and I tried to focus on some flowers in front of the Alpine ibex, so to get the ibex out of focus in the background. And I got some images with which I am quite happy. A little bit later, I visited the ptarmigan family again, and the young ones were almost as tall as their mother already. And it was very nice to see that they were still, all of them, and did very well. So it was nice to get the footage of the same family when they were young and when they grew up more and more. And in the very beginning of September, the highlight were some dotterels in the Swiss mountains, which did a quick stop on their way or on their migration south to Africa. And so I got some nice images, and it's just always nice to see this very rare bird species in Switzerland. In autumn, it was very great to spend the time above the clouds, especially in the mountains. And for example, I did this during full moon and had to go to photograph the Alpine ibex with the full moon above the clouds. And probably once again, one of the highlights from this year was that this plan worked out perfectly. And on one morning where there was the full moon still setting above the mountains with the clouds, I was able to discover some Alpine ibex at the perfect location. And still on that same morning, I photographed some more ibex just against the light with backlight and still above the clouds with the mountains. So that was a very nice morning. And then coming into October, the main thing in October was a very spontaneous trip to Canada. And I kind of got invited to Canada by an NGO. And yeah, I had some days off in Vancouver, which I spent together with Liron Gertzman. I met him for the first time. We just chatted on Instagram before, and he was such a nice guy, and we had an absolutely great time together. And also found a lot of birds next to Vancouver, so that was very nice. What wasn't very nice is that I got bitten by a tick back in Switzerland, and in Canada I realized that it is, I guess it's called Lyme disease in English, and so I had to go to the hospital and everything got a little bit complicated. However, luckily I didn't got very sick and was able to continue the trip. And after this, I had the chance to observe my very first brown bears. And that was very nice. We only saw two of them, but still it was a magical encounter. And I would say I will just show you some of my favorite moments from this time in Canada before we'll come back to the Swiss mountains. So back in the Swiss mountains and already coming into November, I spent again a few days in the mountains. Especially there was a 3 days trip where we had the first snow and found some ptarmigans, but now completely white and ready for winter. And yeah, I will show you some of the footage from these days. And after this, I think that's already it for the highlight video of 2024 because it's still December when I'm recording this. There's still some weeks left to hopefully get some more highlights, but you will see these probably in the highlight video of 2025. So enjoy some of the last footage from November, and then we will see us again in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye.